Hello, this is Teresa. I'm back with another video tutorial for Dare to be Artsy. I'm featuring some fall themed cards, and I made all of these with a colorful alcohol ink background. Now I'm going to be using this really cool stamp set from Dare to be Artsy. It's not a new one, but it is one that I really love with the design on the leaves. I think it's called Leaf Zentangle. And Yupo paper, you may or may not know, comes in more than one size. I have a pad here where it's 9 by 12 inches, and as far as I'm concerned, the bigger the canvas, the more opportunity to get a really cool result and turn it into multiple cards at one time. So I'm beginning using some alcohol blending solution, which is the first thing I put down. Then I've chosen some autumn colors in yellow, gold, orange, and green to put all over the background. So I'm just kind of dripping the colors all over the canvas in different spots, and then I'll add more alcohol blending solution, and then I use a variety of techniques to make the alcohol colors move around. And as you'll see, I just kind of keep doing kind of the same kind of things. I drip some colors on. I use this tool, which is a marker spritzer, but minus the marker, in order to move the ink around on the paper. And if I have any white spots, I just pick up and add some color to those spots in order to fill them in. I add more alcohol blending solutions, and therefore I just say, rinse and repeat. You just keep doing the same things over and over until you get a result that you're satisfied with. So what you'll see me doing is adding more colors in some spots, adding more blending solution, and so forth. So I won't keep boring you with this process. It's just the same kind of thing over and over. Once I am satisfied, I do need to set it aside so it can completely dry before I move on to doing anything else. And now my panel is almost completely dry. Now in the bottom left hand corner, you can see that there are some really darker areas that look like almost like veins, and I'm putting down some gold leafing on top of those areas because they're still just slightly sticky. Everything else in the panel is dry except those areas, so I thought I would take advantage of that by using this technique where you just apply some of this gold leafing material. And this is from Nuvo. They're called Gilded Flakes, I believe. And I'm using a brush just to take away the excess. And now you can see I have cut this into 4 different panels for my original size. I attempted to do an experiment and gold emboss on one panel, and what I got with that was a warp panel. But not to fear, I will get to actually use some of that panel in the final 3 cards, as you'll see as I go through this process. Now on the first of the 3 panels, I decided I would try some StazOn pigment ink in brown and see what happened when I stamped it on. And as you'll see on the first stamp, when I pull it away, I get a brown stamp, and I like that, and I thought I would continue to do the same thing and just kind of build a background panel on there. However, I was kind of surprised at what happened once I stamped down the second time. Is instead of getting a brown stamped image, when I pulled it off, and as you'll see, it looks like nothing has happened, but it's not like the ink lifted off, but neither did it actually leave a stamped image. So I tried it a couple more times just to see, was that a fluke, until I decided I was going to have to move on and do something different or use a different ink. But I just wanted to show you what would happen if you try to use this particular ink on this panel, what would actually happen. But not to worry, I come back, I come up with a different way to use this, and I turn it into a card. So that's what card making is about, right? It's a little bit of experimentation at times. And sometimes that's what I do to help you see what you might want to try or not want to try, right? So here's another experiment. On one of the panels, it has a very, very unique pattern on it. And what the heck, I decided to try archival ink, and I looked at the colors I had and I thought, I'm going to use purple. I'm not sure why I decided to use purple, but what was interesting about this is when I stamped it on, it didn't really, well, I mean, it looked purple in some places, but in some others it didn't. But the overall look actually was pleasing to me, so I just kept going with this. And this ended up being a very nice base for a card. And as you'll see shortly, I end up just trimming this down slightly because I want to put it on a craft cardstock base, and then I'm going to do my sentiment in the center of it. I really don't want to take away from the beautiful color in this, so what I use is some gold vellum paper in order to create just the perfect sentiment. I've already stamped the gold vellum and I die cut it with an oval die that I had, and I'm now gluing on the background that I've put together. And then when I add the oval sentiment that I've stamped onto gold vellum paper in the center, the gold vellum won't hide all the detail behind it. So I've got to make sure that I choose an adhesive that's not going to show through the front. So I'm using some multi-matte medium. And you'll see that in the end when I show all the cards. So this is the panel where I started to stamp with a brown ink, and it only stamped brown the very first time, so I decided to go with a different approach. So I'm using Versamark, and I'm going to go back and stamp over where I stamped before, because although you can't see it on camera, I can see pretty much where I stamped before. And I'm going to be using that gold leaf, the Nouveau Gold Gilded Flakes again. So I'm using the Versamark so that I have a sticky ink for it to adhere to. I already know from my prior experiments that it did not do well with heat embossing, so I'm going to avoid heat embossing altogether by just using the Versamark ink and the Gilded Flakes, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment about how that works. Now I have a bunch of gilded flakes inside of a big plastic container, so that's there to contain the mess, because this is pretty much a very messy thing to work with. Now what I've done is I dipped my panel into the container with all the flakes. I covered it up with the flakes, and now I'm just using my thumb and fingers to remove the excess. And this is one of those things where it's going to give you what I'll call an artsy result. So it's not going to look as precise as when you do something like gold or any embossing powder for that matter. You're just going to get the impression of the stamped image that I did with the Versamark ink to start with. So now you can kind of see that coming together. And I was just loving how that looked. So I did go back with some of the smaller stamps in the set. There's a smaller leaf. There's a little, I want to say it's a pecan or a nut of some kind in this stamp set. So I add a few accents on the same panel and do the same exact technique in order to build out a full panel for a card front. So that's what it's looking like so far. And now I'm going to use that panel where I was doing some experimentation on, but experimentation on so I could see what was going to work, what was not going to work. And I've pulled out a word die from Dare to Be Artsy. It's the Hello Word die, and it has a shadow as well. I'm going to cut the shadow out of gold vellum paper, and I've already die cut the Hello Word out of the other panel of alcohol ink background, and that made a lovely card onto craft cardstock base. And so for the last card I'm going to do, this is the simplest one of all. I'm just going to use this detailed leaf background die and create a cover plate to put over this the third panel, and now you can see what that looks like. I was so excited to get these three lovely cards. They are all similar in color, but they're completely lovely and unique. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a thumbs up and or a comment below. And until next time, I dare you to get artsy.